how reincarnation was erased from Christian teachings. Imagine a teaching so powerful that rulers feared it. A belief so transformative that powerful men spent centuries trying to hide it. What if I told you that early Christians believed in something that modern churches deny? The idea that our souls live many lives, not just one. This isn't just another theory. This is about a deliberate choice made by emperors and bishops. A choice that changed Christianity forever. The evidence is hidden in plain sight, or in the very words of Jesus himself.
Did you know that for over 500 years after Christ, many Christians believed in reincarnation, and then suddenly, they didn't? This is the untold story of how and why reincarnation was removed from Christian teachings.
Think about it. The greatest mysteries of life are, where did we come from? And where do we go when we die? Every religion tries to answer these questions. But what if one of Christianity's original answers was purposely erased? Most Christians today believe we have just one life, then heaven or hell forever. No second chances, no do-overs. But this wasn't always the case. The shocking truth is that many early followers of Jesus believed something completely different. They believed in a cosmic journey of many lifetimes, a path where each soul learns and grows across centuries, a journey that doesn't end with one mistake or one success. This isn't New Age thinking. This was Christianity before powerful people changed it. Long before Jesus walked on earth, ancient people around the world believed our souls could return many times. In India, priests taught that each person would be reborn until they learned all life's lessons. In Egypt, sacred texts described how souls would travel between this world and the next. Even the great Greek thinkers like Pythagoras and Plato taught that souls moved from body to body, growing wiser with each life. These weren't simple folk tales. These were complex spiritual systems practiced by some of the most advanced civilizations of their time. They believed that each life gave the soul another chance to grow, to learn, to become better.
The ancient Egyptians lived their entire lives preparing for what would happen after death. Their famous Book of the Dead wasn't about staying dead. It was about the soul's journey after the body died. Their priests taught that the soul could choose to return to earth in a new body after spending time in the afterlife. This wasn't punishment. It was an opportunity for more experience. In India, the idea of reincarnation goes back at least 3,000 years. The Upanishads, ancient Hindu texts, described how the soul, Atman, travels from life to life based on karma, the effects of your actions. Good actions lead to better future lives. Bad actions lead to more difficult ones. The goal wasn't to escape punishment, but to learn from each life until the soul became perfect.
The Greeks had their own version of this teaching. Pythagoras, the famous mathematician who lived 500 years before Jesus, told his students that he could remember his past lives. He claimed to remember being a warrior in the Trojan War in an earlier life. His followers avoided eating meat because they believed animals might contain the souls of humans in another form. Plato wrote that souls who lived good lives would return to the stars, while those who needed more growth would return to Earth in new bodies. He believed some people could remember the knowledge from past lives, which explained why some children seemed naturally gifted at certain skills. These ideas weren't limited to far-off lands. They were spreading throughout the Mediterranean world at the time Jesus was born. Many Jewish groups were familiar with these concepts. The historian Josephus wrote that the Pharisees, a major Jewish group in Jesus' time, believed in something very similar to reincarnation. But here's where it gets interesting. Many early followers of Jesus believed in reincarnation too. After Jesus died, Christianity wasn't one organized religion with clear rules. Different groups of Christians had different ideas about what Jesus really taught. There was no single Bible yet, no pope ruling over everyone, just communities trying to understand the divine and what happens after death. These early Christians were explorers of truth. They saw the soul as something eternal, something that existed before birth and would continue after death. Many believed the soul would return to earth in new bodies until it became pure enough to join with God forever. The Gnostic Christians, who claimed to have secret teachings from Jesus, wrote texts that clearly mention reincarnation. The Pistis Sophia, a Gnostic text, has Jesus explicitly discussing how souls return to earth multiple times. In the Gospel of Thomas found in Egypt in 1945, Jesus speaks of the state before birth and after death in ways that suggest pre-existence of the soul. These weren't just fringe groups. Gnostic Christians made up a large portion of early believers. Their libraries contained dozens of Gospels and teachings beyond what we know today as the Bible. Many of these texts were destroyed when their views fell out of favor. Even some Jewish Christians, those closest to Jesus' original teachings, held beliefs about multiple lives. They pointed to the Jewish prophets who spoke of returning figures like Elijah. They noted that Jesus himself referred to John the Baptist as Elijah who was to come. Early Christian communities in Alexandria, Egypt, became centers of learning where Greek philosophy mixed with Christian teaching. Their leaders taught that the soul existed before birth and would continue its journey after death, perhaps through many lifetimes. This wasn't seen as contradicting Jesus' message. It was seen as the deeper meaning behind his words about eternal life and being born from above. Even the Christian communities founded by Paul, who wrote much of the New Testament, contained believers who accepted the idea of multiple lives. Paul himself wrote about a spiritual body that was different from our physical body, suggesting the soul's journey wasn't limited to one physical existence. In those first few centuries, Christianity was vibrant and diverse. There was room for many understandings of Jesus' message. No central authority had yet declared which views were acceptable and which weren't. One of the most brilliant early Christian teachers was a man named Origen of Alexandria. He lived around 200 years after Jesus and was respected as one of the greatest Christian minds of his time. Origen wrote that the soul existed before birth and would continue its journey through many lives. In his famous book on First Principles, Origen explained that souls would return to earth again and again, not as punishment, but as a chance to learn and grow. Each new life was shaped by choices in past lives. Each life moved the soul closer to becoming like God. Origen wasn't some minor figure or heretic. He was considered a genius. He wrote over 6,000 books and treatises. Church leaders traveled from all over to learn from him. He was the head of the catechetical school of Alexandria, the most important Christian school of its time. When Origen spoke, people listened. His teachings on reincarnation were sophisticated. He didn't just copy Greek or Egyptian ideas. He developed a distinctly Christian understanding of the soul's journey. For Origen, reincarnation explained why some people seem born with advantages while others face hardship from birth. It wasn't random chance or God being unfair. It was the result of choices in previous lives. He wrote, "Every soul comes into this world strengthened by the victories or weakened by the defeats of its previous life." This explained why some people seemed naturally drawn to goodness, while others struggled with darker impulses. Origen also taught that eventually, after many lives, all souls would return to God. No one would be lost forever. Even the worst sinners would eventually learn from their mistakes and find redemption. This was a hopeful message that inspired many early Christians. Origen wasn't alone in these beliefs. Clement of Alexandria, his teacher, held similar views. So did many other respected Christian teachers of the time. Synesius, Bishop of Cyrene, Arnobius of Sicca, and possibly even Gregory of Nyssa, who is still considered a saint in many churches today. For Origen, this wasn't against Christian teaching. It fit perfectly with what Jesus taught about spiritual growth and transformation. After all, how could a soul become perfect in just one short lifetime? But something dramatic happened that would change Christianity forever. In the year 553, a meeting called the Second Council of Constantinople was held. This wasn't just any meeting, it was a gathering with the power to decide what Christians could and couldn't believe. Emperor Justinian called this meeting. He wasn't just interested in spiritual truth, he wanted power and control. A religion where everyone believed the same things would make his empire stronger. The idea of reincarnation didn't fit his plans. If people believed they had many lives to grow and improve, they might not fear the church's rules so much. They might not be in such a rush to obey religious leaders who claimed to control their one chance at salvation. Beside Emperor Justinian stood his wife, Empress Theodora. She had her own reasons to hate the idea of reincarnation. Before becoming empress, Theodora had lived a hard life. She'd been poor, she'd worked as an actress, and some say as a prostitute. These experiences left deep scars. The thought of being born again into another difficult life terrified her. She preferred the official church teaching that we live only once, then face judgment. One life, one chance, no coming back. But there was more at stake than just personal preference. The political situation in the Byzantine Empire was unstable. Justinian needed the church to help control the population. He needed a religion that made people fear divine punishment and obey authority without question. The church itself was changing. What had once been a spiritual movement was becoming an institution with buildings, wealth, and power. Church leaders were becoming more like government officials than spiritual guides. They had a vested interest in controlling people's beliefs about the afterlife. Reincarnation threatened this control. If people believed they had many chances to get things right, why would they need priests to save them from hell? If salvation happened through a natural process of growth across many lives, why would they need to obey church rules?
The Council of Constantinople wasn't really about theology, it was about power. The bishops who attended were under enormous pressure from the emperor. Many who might have defended Origen's views were not invited. Some who opposed the emperor's wishes were threatened or imprisoned.
The Pope himself, Vigilius, refused to attend, sensing that the proceedings were rigged. But even his absence didn't stop what was coming. The council was determined to eliminate all traces of reincarnation from Christian teaching. They didn't just condemn the idea, they went further. They declared Origen, who had been dead for 300 years and couldn't defend himself, a heretic. They ordered his books burned. They threatened anyone who taught his ideas with excommunication, cutting them off from the church community. Together, Justinian and Theodora pushed the church leaders to declare reincarnation a false teaching. They turned against Origen's ideas, calling them dangerous. Anyone who continued to teach reincarnation would be pushed out of the church. The decision was political, not just spiritual. It was about control, it was about power, and it worked. The teaching of reincarnation disappeared from official Christian doctrine. The effects were immediate and far-reaching. Monks who had studied Origen's works were expelled from their monasteries. Libraries containing his books were destroyed. Scholars who dared to mention pre-existence of souls or multiple lives risked losing their positions or, worse. Over the next few generations, the teaching of reincarnation was systematically erased from Christian memory. Children were taught the new doctrine, one life, then heaven or hell forever. The rich diversity of early Christian thought was replaced by a single approved version of the faith. What's most shocking is how complete this erasure was. For centuries afterward, most Christians had no idea that reincarnation had ever been part of their faith. The works of Origen that survived were carefully edited to remove references to pre-existence and multiple lives. History was rewritten by the winners, but a few traces remained. Brave scholars kept some of Origen's original writings hidden. Underground groups continued to teach the old ways in secret, and in remote monasteries, some monks still whispered about the soul's long journey through many lives. The official story became that reincarnation was a foreign idea borrowed from Eastern religions that had never been part of true Christianity. But history tells a different story. The evidence suggests that for many early Christians, reincarnation wasn't foreign at all. It was central to how they understood Jesus' message. But wait, what about the Bible itself? Does it mention reincarnation? Many scholars point to passages that seem to suggest the soul's return. In Matthew 17, the disciples asked Jesus about the prophet Elijah, who was supposed to return before the Messiah came. Jesus gives a surprising answer. He says Elijah already came back as John the Baptist. Jesus doesn't explain or qualify this statement. He simply states it as fact, as if the idea that a soul could return in a new body was completely normal. This wasn't a small detail. The return of Elijah was a major prophecy in Jewish tradition. The prophet Malachi had written, "Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord." Jews had been waiting centuries for this to happen. When Jesus identified John the Baptist as Elijah returned, he was making a profound statement about how souls can return. And the disciples accepted this. They didn't question or doubt. It fit with their understanding of how the spiritual world worked. John the Baptist himself, when asked directly if he was Elijah, said no. This apparent contradiction makes sense if John didn't remember his past life, which aligns with how many ancient traditions viewed reincarnation. The person might not remember, but the soul continues its journey. In John 9, the disciples see a man born blind and ask Jesus, "Who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Think about that question for a moment. How could a man sin before being born unless he existed before? The disciples seem to assume a person could carry sins from a previous life.
Jesus doesn't correct this idea. Instead, he simply says this particular case of blindness wasn't because of anyone's sin.
This passage reveals something crucial about the disciples' worldview. They took it for granted that a soul could have done something before birth that would affect its current life. And Jesus doesn't tell them they're wrong about this basic assumption. He only corrects them about this specific case. And then there's the famous conversation between Jesus and Nicodemus in John 3. Jesus says, "No one can see the kingdom of God unless they are born again." Confused, Nicodemus asks how someone can go back into their mother's womb. Jesus explains he's talking about spiritual rebirth, but some scholars believe this teaching had a deeper meaning that early Christians would have understood, that souls are born many times on their journey to God. The Greek words Jesus uses are anothen genethe, which can mean both born again and born from above. This double meaning suggests both physical rebirth and spiritual transformation. For early Christians familiar with Greek philosophy, this would have resonated with concepts of the soul's journey through multiple lives. There are other intriguing hints in the Bible. In Matthew 11:14, Jesus says about John the Baptist, "And if you are willing to accept it, he is the Elijah who was to come." The phrase, "if you are willing to accept it," suggests this was a teaching not everyone was ready to understand. In Mark 9:13, Jesus is even more direct. "But I tell you, Elijah has come, and they have done to him everything they wished, just as it is written about him." He's clearly stating that a figure from the past has returned in a new body. These passages don't prove early Christians believed in reincarnation, but they raise important questions. Questions that for centuries no one was allowed to ask. Today, the idea of reincarnation is making a comeback, not just in Eastern religions, but in Western spiritual circles too. Modern psychology researchers like Dr. Ian Stevenson spent decades studying children who remember details from past lives, details they couldn't possibly know otherwise.
Thousands of these cases have been documented. Children who know intimate details about strangers who died before they were born. children who have birthmarks that match fatal wounds on those deceased people, children who can speak languages they never learned.
Take the case of James Leininger, a Louisiana boy who, at age 2, began having nightmares about a plane crash. He knew details about World War II aircraft that baffled his parents. He could identify planes no toddler should recognize. He knew the name of an aircraft carrier, the Natoma Bay. He even knew the name of his other friend, Jack Larson. His parents, both Christians with no belief in reincarnation, were shocked when they researched and found that a pilot named James Houston had died when his plane was shot down near Japan. He had served on the Natoma Bay, and one of his fellow pilots was named Jack Larson. James isn't alone. Ryan Hammonds, at age 4, told his mother, "Mama, I used to be somebody else." He described living in Hollywood and dancing on Broadway. He recognized himself in a photograph from a 1932 movie pointing to an extra. Research revealed the man was Marty Martin, an agent and dancer who had indeed worked in Hollywood, facts the boy couldn't have known through normal means. Dr. Stevenson documented over 3,000 cases like these across cultures and religions. Many involved children too young to have learned the information through normal means. Often these children show emotions and phobias connected to how they died in their previous life. Therapists like Dr. Brian Weiss use past life regression to help people heal trauma that doesn't seem to come from this life. They found that exploring memories of past lives can sometimes resolve deep emotional problems when nothing else works. Dr. Weiss was a conventional psychiatrist with no belief in reincarnation until a patient under hypnosis began describing details from past lives that she later verified as historically accurate. Since then, he's helped thousands of patients work through phobias, relationship problems, and chronic pain by addressing their possible origins in past lives. Even some Christian theologians are beginning to reconsider reincarnation. Geddes McGregor, an Anglican priest and professor of philosophy, argued in his book, Reincarnation in Christianity, that belief in multiple lives is compatible with Christian teaching. He suggests that the doctrine's rejection was more political than theological. Science hasn't proven reincarnation exists, but it hasn't disproven it either. The question remains open for those willing to look beyond traditional teachings. So why does this matter? Why should we care about a religious debate from 1500 years ago? Because it shows that the beliefs we take for granted weren't always set in stone. They were shaped by human choices, sometimes for spiritual reasons, sometimes for political ones. It reminds us to question, to dig deeper, to look beyond official stories. It invites us to explore the greatest mysteries ourselves. What happens after death? Does the soul continue? Do we get more than one chance to learn life's lessons? The story of reincarnation in Christianity reveals something profound about how beliefs evolve. It wasn't theologians alone who decided which doctrines would survive. It was emperors, politicians, and power struggles that determined what most Christians would believe for centuries. This pattern continues today. The beliefs we accept often come to us not because they're true, but because they're convenient for those in power. Every generation has its Justinians, people who benefit from controlling what others believe about the most fundamental questions of existence. The debate about reincarnation isn't just about what happens after death, it's about who we are now. Are we souls on a long journey through many lives, or are we defined only by this one brief existence? If we are souls on a longer journey, it changes how we see everything. Suffering takes on new meaning when viewed as part of a larger process of growth. The inequalities of birth. Why some are born rich, others poor, some healthy, others sick, become less random and more connected to a larger pattern of justice. And perhaps most importantly, reincarnation offers hope. Hope that mistakes can be corrected, hope that lessons not learned in this life can be mastered in the next. hope that no soul is ever truly lost. Whether early Christians were right about reincarnation, we may never know for certain. The evidence is fragmentary, buried under centuries of official doctrine. But we can ask the questions they asked. We can wonder, as they did, about the soul's journeys. Some modern Christians are reconsidering reincarnation, finding ways to reconcile it with core Christian beliefs about salvation and resurrection. Others maintain that one life is enough, that God's grace can accomplish in a single lifetime what others believe takes many. In the end, whether you believe in one life or many, what matters most is how you live this one. With love, with courage, with an open mind and a seeking heart. The truth isn't always what we've been taught. Sometimes it's what we discover when we dare to ask the questions no one wants asked.